Hello, I'm Scott Wipperman, the pastor here at First Presbyterian Church. And no matter who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, know that you're welcome here. We hope you enjoy today's service on this video, and we invite you to come join us for worship anytime that you would like, or join us in any of the other activities of the church. For more information about First Presbyterian Church, please visit our website at fpchelena.com or call us at 442-4775. God bless. Our gospel reading today comes from Matthew. This follows immediately upon the feeding of the 5,000. They have just met and been fed, and then we get to this text. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. And when evening came, he was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. And during the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and he began to sink and cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. And then those who were there in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." The word of the Lord. Well, have you ever had one of those days where it's just been the pits? No, I'm not talking about working in the pits. Nor am I speaking about spending a night playing in the pits. And this really isn't the type of pits that I had in mind. But if you did spend a day working in these pits, you might end up looking a little bit like this. But at least you chose to do this and you got compensated for your toil. But I'm talking about, those days when it's just the pits. Something maybe more like this. You know there's a leak in that pipe somewhere, and you've got to find it, right? Or maybe something more akin to this. No, this is not a picture from my desk while preparing this week's sermon. Or maybe you've had this kind of day. Or possibly some moments like this, which were immediately followed by other moments that put a kink in the rest of your day. But some days, things are really in the pits. Maybe you had this kind of day, where you came right out of your boots in the mud, leading to something like this. Or worse yet, maybe your day started out like this. But possibly you were just walking along, minding your own business, and then you wound up here. Where do you go from this place? Maybe you've had a day like this. A day, I guess one of those Excedrin headache days, maybe caused by the fact that one of those under your command did something along the line of this. And so what do we do now, kind of thing. Maybe you had a day where you were planning just on a light little Sunday afternoon outing with the family, and it turned into something more like this. And now your grandkids swear they'll never get on a sailboat again. Or possibly you found yourself looking up and this was your view. You were looking out of a pit. And you were actually, yes, in a pit. Your day was just not the pits, but you were there. And this was the kind of day that Joseph was having. Here he was, sent out by his father to go find his brothers grazing the sheep someplace. And they were told that his father said, they're in a field over here. And he goes to that field, and lo and behold, there's no brothers and no sheep. But there is a local who said, oh, well, they went over that way. And so Joseph goes over there and finds his brothers and runs up to them, and they promptly throw him into a cistern. Day is looking pretty bad. But the day goes on, and pretty soon the brothers come to their senses. They're pulling him up out of this pit, and they immediately sell him to some Ishmaelites. So he's now in slavery. And as far as he can tell, the rest of his days are going to kind of be days in the pits, being a slave for the rest of his life. But Joseph isn't alone. Jesus sends the disciples out to sail to the other side of the sea. They head out in the evening, and the wind picks up, and the waves get bigger. But the disciples rest in the confidence that they have Peter and his brothers there in the boat, fishermen who know how to sail, fishermen who know the Sea of Galilee. And Peter and his brothers are doing the best they possibly can to pilot this boat through the storm and the waves, to work with the wind and the chop, to trim the sails, to instruct others in the boat as to what to do, like keep bailing. But Peter and his brothers, being sailors, also know the limits of their meager resources against nature when it decides to come unfurled. Peter and his brothers know that sometimes the storm wins. Peter and his brothers are all too aware that they're losing this battle. But they've been fighting this throughout the whole night, that the crew is wet and cold and getting tired. And little by little, the ship is getting lower. And where is Jesus through all this? Jesus is up on a mountaintop praying. Apparently of absolute no use to those in the boat who think that they're about ready to meet a watery grave, who think that they're out there on their own. Because what would God care about them? A few people, tax collectors, fishermen, people of no accord, of no account, in a boat. What does God, who created the earth and the storms and the seas, what concern does he have of them? They're out here on their own. They got to fight it out to see if they can make it. Have you ever felt like that? But late in the fourth watch, those in the boat look out across the water and they see something else beside the wind and the chop. And at first they're terrified. Is this the ghost of death that has come to claim us? But they tell us that immediately Jesus calls out, "Do not be afraid, for it is me." And they begin to think that maybe there's hope. Because you may remember an earlier story when they were in a boat on the sea and Jesus was asleep in the stern and he calmed the seas and saved them. But history doesn't always make us cognizant in the moment of what reality should be. And Peter, doubting, says, "Let me come out to you." And Jesus, wanting to accommodate those in the boats, wanting to attend to their needs, says, "Sure, come." And Peter starts walking on the water towards Jesus, but as he watches the wind and the waves around him, Peter's knowledge of the sea overcomes him, and he begins to sink. And this is the great part. This is the personal part. This is the personal salvation part. Peter says, "Save me, Lord." And immediately Jesus reaches out and takes his hand and pulls him back into the boat. Jesus is there for these sailors. God is there for us. When we are out in the waves and on the waters, we are not alone, because our God does know us. And when Jesus then calmed the waves and calmed the seas, and like I said, the disciples had seen this before, and when they saw it before, they said, "What kind of man is this that has power over the ocean and the seas, that has this ability to control the cosmic?" Here they see that this person that can deal with the cosmic also cares about the person, cares about Peter, and lifted him and rescued him and brought him into salvation. And when they see this meeting of the cosmic and the personal, the only thing they can do is bend down and worship Jesus and thank him for what they've done and say, "Surely you are the Son of God." So, until the cosmic concept of God that we might have meets the personal experience of snatched from the brink kind of salvation, we won't fall down in worship. But when the cosmic meets the personal, we instinctively get the connection between God and humanity, between heaven and earth, between creation and redemption, between omnipotence and intimacy. We know that this God that we often think of as too little of a God is a much bigger God and can go beyond what we imagine God can do. Nothing, no one is God forsaken. Even if you're starring in the movie entitled Forsaken. But there will be long and stormy times in our lives, terror-inducing sessions that we might have. But Jesus has not abandoned us when we are in these times. There may be times that when we're betrayed by those closest to us, when we're thrown into a cistern and sold into slavery. There may be times when we're on a boat battered by the sea and it seems that all is lost and there's nothing or no one that cares about us, that God has forgotten us. But God worked through the highly dysfunctional family of Jacob to bring about his good. And God works through our families and their troubles. God works through exile and estrangement and detachment. God works through these things and is with us through those. He works through our grief. He works through our fear. And when we have questions about God's plan, when we have doubts, when our faith doesn't seem to be big enough, it's often because our vision of God is insufficient. It's not big enough, so therefore our faith is also a little too small. Because we sometimes have a hard time imagining that a God that created the universe could care about us and know about us. Because we can't imagine ourselves being able to do that. But God can, and God does, and Christ does. They created the world, they control the seas, and they care about each one of us individually and what happens to us. And we are never left alone. So, when the cosmic meets the personal, when we experience that, we never forget it. We remember that. I strongly suspect that there's been periods in your life where you've seen that cosmic and that personal come together and touch. You probably will never forget those moments. Those moments when we know that we've been saved by grace and we know the love of God. We can't help but worship and bear witness to the one who reached out to us when we were in our time of trouble. We can't help but proclaim the storm story for those of us who are fishers of people. We can't help but proclaim that God that created the world knows us personally and cares for us. So let us go out and share that message. Because we stand on a very solid rock.